next few videos, we'll discuss the Freudian psychoanalytic approach to the study of personality. The psychoanalytic approach is unique in its emphasis on the unconscious mind as the driving force behind personality development and expression. In Freud's conceptualization, the majority of the psyche or personality is submerged in the unconscious or subconscious mind. According to Freud, the self is composed of the id, the superego, and the ego. The id is completely submerged below consciousness, and we are unaware of the desires and impulses of the id. The id operates based on the pleasure principle. It seeks gratification with no concern for the consequences. The id is described as impulsive and almost primitive or juvenile. The superego is our internalized moral compass, our conscience. While the id is seeking instant gratification, the superego is concerned with moral righteousness. Only a small portion of the superego is conscious. The ego operates on the reality principle and acts as a mediator between the id and superego. The ego attempts to strike a balance between meeting the needs of the id and the standards of the superego. Our conscious awareness primarily consists of the ego. Freud argued that many of our motivations and desires lie outside of awareness. He originally proposed the libido as the primary driving force or instinct. The libido is our sexual instinct, but keep in mind that many argue that Freud's conceptualization of sexuality was broader than our modern definition. It's thought that sexuality in this context could refer to any physical pleasure, not just those that are erotic in nature. And so the libido can be thought of as more of a life force. After witnessing the devastation of World War I, Freud proposed a counterpart to the libido, thanatos, or the death instinct. He argued that we have these opposing drives toward life and reproduction on one hand and destruction on the other. If kept internalized, the death instinct would destroy the self, and so we project it outwards in the form of aggression, violence, and war. So the question is, can we have unconscious ideas and desires? Some of the research on attitude formation and change suggests that the answer is yes. When people were asked to deliberately explain why they held a particular attitude, they often changed their attitude, suggesting that the conscious reasons that they generated didn't match the attitude they actually held. So the original attitude was based on feelings or ideas outside of conscious awareness. Further, researchers from the University of Amsterdam found that thorough conscious deliberation, like making a pros and cons list, led to lower decision satisfaction. They concluded that complex decisions might be better left to unconscious thought. The important factors guiding the decision may lie outside of conscious attention. Freud argued that a primary function of the ego is to protect the psyche from the upsetting and threatening content of the unconscious mind. A variety of defense mechanisms have been proposed by Sigmund and his daughter, Anna Freud. In fact, much of what we know about defense mechanisms comes from the writings of Anna Freud, who expanded and clarified the work of her father in this domain. Defense mechanisms are techniques used by the ego to deal with threatening or anxiety-provoking ideas. The root defense mechanism at the foundation of the others is repression. Repression is what allows for the unconscious mind. It's the mechanism by which we push thoughts outside of conscious awareness. Particularly, Freud argued that memories of traumatic events were often repressed in an attempt to protect the psyche. In Freud's original theories, current psychological distress, typically neuroses, could be attributed to repressed memories of childhood sexual trauma. Of course, this theory was incredibly controversial, both at the time and to this day. But let's examine a few of our defense mechanisms. Denial is taking repression a step further. It's the outright refusal to accept reality. The individual denies the very existence of the threatening event or idea in question. This seems extreme, but think about the existential threats that we face today. Many deny global warming. The COVID-19 death toll is over 180,000 in the US alone, and there are people who deny its existence. However, in general, it's thought that denial is a relatively ineffective defense, and research suggests that the use of denial declines with age. The use of projection has been shown to increase with age. Rather than acknowledging the threatened impulse within themselves, the individual projects it onto someone else. I don't have a problem, you do. So when we see the worst in other people, maybe what we're really seeing is our own repressed insecurities. Sublimation is a potentially more socially desirable defense mechanism. When someone engages in sublimation, they take the threatening desire or impulse and channel it into something more socially accepted or approved. So someone with violent urges may channel that in playing an aggressive sport. Displacement is similar in that our forbidden urges are channeled to something less threatening. So you might want to punch your boss, but you go home and punch your pillow instead. I think we can maybe all relate to this. Has anyone realized in the middle of a fight that what you're arguing about isn't really what you're upset about? Instead of addressing the real problem, you're shifting your anger and fears onto something else. Sublimation and displacement are closely tied to our beliefs surrounding catharsis. Influenced by the basic mechanics of the steam engine, Freud argued that repressing the impulses of the id creates pressure that increases or builds over time. At some point, the individual would need to release this pressure by satisfying those id impulses. They would need to blow off steam or vent. So in other words, one couldn't just bottle up their violent urges indefinitely. They would need to release or express them in some fashion through sublimation or displacement. Catharsis is the idea that individuals should release their aggressive urges in socially acceptable ways, and that doing so could be therapeutic and overall reduce aggressive behavior in the future. This theory is very popular in pop psychology, and many use this as a justification for all sorts of aggressive habits. Unfortunately, the research does not support this theory. Researchers have tried again and again and again. The bottom line is catharsis doesn't work. Acting on your aggressive urges increases future aggressive tendencies. And this is true when researchers look at immediate and delayed effects. For example, Bushman colleagues exposed participants to an anger-inducing experience. Participants were blatantly insulted. The participants were then randomly assigned to simply sit quietly or engage in catharsis by hammering nails or punching a punching bag. Afterwards, participants were then asked to play a competitive game in which they had the opportunity to act aggressively. Those who engaged in catharsis exhibited more aggression in the competitive game compared to those who just sat quietly. Effects were amplified if participants thought about the person who insulted them while they were punching the punching bag. This rumination and catharsis increased rather than drained the aggressive urges. The same findings extend to playing violent video games or watching violent television. So why is the idea of catharsis so appealing? One reason is it helps to justify our acts of anger-induced aggression. Another is that engaging in catharsis typically makes us feel subjectively satisfied. But while many report feeling better after engaging in catharsis, it does nothing to reduce actual aggression levels. The research suggests that encouraging people to vent their aggression may promote rather than reduce future acts of aggression. And this is incredibly important to keep in mind. Cultural beliefs are important in terms of fueling behavior, influencing behavior. Malaysian men would engage in running amok, a murderous rampage that was considered uncontrollable by their culture. When British colonials started holding them accountable, running amok sort of died out or ceased to take place. So if we have this cultural belief in catharsis and people endorse this belief, we may be increasing the prevalence of aggression and violence in our culture.